I always thought betrayal would come from strangers. But it wasn't some outsider who cracked open my life. It was the woman I trusted most. My wife, Claire. We had been together for over 15 years. Long enough to believe some bonds were unbreakable. Long enough to overlook the signs, the cold glances, the absent conversations, the way she flinched whenever my brother-in-law, Warren, entered the room. My daughter, Lily, noticed first. She's 20, sharper than a blade, with her mother's hazel eyes but none of her mother's cruelty. She watched Claire with growing suspicion, while I buried my head in the sand, clinging to a dying dream. It all started on a rainy Thursday. I came home earlier than usual. My meetings were canceled, and for the first time in months, I thought maybe I could surprise Claire with dinner, maybe find that thread that once tied us together. Instead, I found Claire in the kitchen, laughing too freely, standing too close to Warren. The way he leaned into her, the casual touch on her wrist, it wasn't a brotherly gesture. It was something older, deeper, almost familiar. I stood there, soaked from the rain, invisible to them both, and in that moment, the last thread inside me snapped. They didn't see me. Not really. They saw what they wanted, a comfortable life, a fool who wouldn't question, who wouldn't fight back. Later that night, Lily knocked on my door. "You saw it too, didn't you, Dad?" she said, voice low, trembling with rage. I nodded. That night we made a silent pact, without needing to say the words. We would not confront Claire. Not yet. We would watch. We would learn. We would wait. And when the time was right, we would make her regret every smirk, every whispered lie. The game had begun. The days that followed were excruciating. Each morning I wore the mask of a clueless husband, offering the same dry smiles, sipping the same bitter coffee Claire placed before me like clockwork. Her eyes, once clear and easy to read, were guarded now. She spoke in short, sharp sentences, never lingering too long in the same room as me. At dinner, Warren became a frequent guest. Too frequent. "Oh, Warren's lonely since Ellen moved out," Claire said with a false brightness, stabbing her fork into the roast chicken without meeting my gaze. "He needs family around him." Family. I chewed slowly, forcing myself to appear relaxed, while Lily shot a glance across the table, her expression blank but her fingers twitching beneath the tablecloth. I learned to catalog every detail. The way Claire's voice softened when Warren called. The subtle touch she gave his shoulder when she passed him a plate. The sudden defensive coldness if I so much as suggested we spend a weekend away, just the two of us. Every kindness she denied me, she lavished on him. It made me sick, but it also clarified one thing. Claire wasn't just cheating physically. Emotionally, she had already left me. One night, Lily knocked again. This time, she had something in her hand, a slim, black recorder. "I planted it in the living room," she said, jaw tight. "I'm not sorry." We sat side by side on my bed, listening in silence as Claire and Warren's voices crackled to life. At first it was harmless, talk of groceries, of house repairs. But then Warren said low and rough, "You looked beautiful tonight, just like you did, back then." Claire laughed, a sound I hadn't heard in years. "That was a long time ago, Warren," she murmured. "Not long enough for me to forget." There was a pause, the sound of movement, a rustle. I shut it off before it could poison me further. Lily stared straight ahead, her hands balled into fists. "She's disgusting," she said. "She thinks we're blind. She thinks you're weak." Maybe I had been, but not anymore. The next morning, I started moving money. Quietly, discreetly. Shared accounts became personal accounts. Trusts were established in Lily's name. Claire wouldn't see it coming, and neither would Warren. The hardest part was pretending nothing had changed. Pretending to still be the man they thought they could fool. I took Claire out to dinner 2 nights later. She wore a tight red dress I hadn't seen in years, her hair pinned back in lazy curls. For a moment, walking into the restaurant with her hand on my arm, I almost forgot the weight pressing on my ribs. Almost. Across from me, she smiled, too wide, too forced. "Matthew," she said, playing with the stem of her wine glass. "I've been thinking, maybe we should sell the lake house. It's just sitting there. I raised an eyebrow. The lake house? That was your dream, Claire. She shrugged, pretending at nonchalance. Dreams change. No, I thought. You changed. I leaned back, studying her the way I might a stranger in an unfamiliar city. Maybe Warren wanted the money. Maybe Claire needed a quick escape fund. It didn't matter. What mattered was that I now saw her clearly, and so did Lily. As we drove home that night, Claire chatting idly about renovations, I allowed myself a small, private smile in the darkness. She thought she was setting the stage for her new life. She didn't realize she was already performing on ours. And the curtains were about to fall. Sunday mornings used to be sacred in our house. Claire would brew coffee, Lily would lounge in the living room, and I would read the paper while the scent of pancakes filled the air. But now, Sundays were theater. I watched Claire as she fussed over breakfast, her laughter hollow, her gestures mechanical. Warren was coming over later that day, another family lunch. She invited him without even asking you, Lily muttered, standing next to me at the window. She doesn't care how obvious it looks anymore. She thinks I won't see it, I said, voice cold. But I did. I saw everything. I installed a small camera in the den, angled perfectly toward the couch where Claire and Warren always seemed to sit a little too close. It wasn't hard. Claire never checked anything anymore. She assumed she was in control. By noon, Warren arrived, carrying a bottle of wine and a bouquet of cheap grocery store flowers. For Claire, it seemed, they might as well have been roses from Versailles. She beamed as she accepted them, standing too long with her hand on his chest. I clenched my jaw so hard I thought my teeth might crack. Throughout lunch, I kept my face neutral, making small talk about nothing: traffic, weather, the local sports team's latest embarrassing defeat. Meanwhile, Lily casually excused herself, slipping away to check the live feed from the den camera. When she returned, her face was pale. "They're planning a trip," she whispered to me in the kitchen. "Together. A trip. Under the guise of a family gathering, no doubt." I almost laughed at the audacity. "They're going to a winery next weekend," she said, disgust thick in her voice. "She told him you're too busy with work, that you won't even notice." Claire was right about one thing. I was busy building her downfall. The next few days were a blur of quiet planning. I contacted an old college friend, Nolan, now a private investigator with a knack for discretion. I kept the conversation brief, the request simple. I need photographic proof. No assumptions, no interpretations, hard evidence. Nolan didn't ask questions. He didn't need to. By Friday, Nolan handed me a flash drive and a grim look. "Are you sure you're ready to see it, Matt?" he asked. "I'm past ready," I said. At home, Lily and I watched the footage together in silence. There they were, Claire and Warren, walking through the vineyard as if they were newlyweds, her arm tucked intimately through his. They shared a bottle of wine, laughing, touching, and then, away from prying eyes but not from Nolan's lens, they kissed. Not a quick, guilty peck. A long, slow kiss full of familiarity and hunger. Lily turned away, pressing her fist to her mouth to keep from sobbing. I sat there, feeling strangely calm, like a man who had finally stopped treading water and allowed himself to sink. I wasn't surprised anymore, just emptied out. "She doesn't deserve you," Lily said fiercely, voice shaking with rage. "She never did." I placed a hand on her shoulder. "She'll get what she deserves," I said, and I meant it. The next morning, Claire breezed into the kitchen wearing a bright sundress and an even brighter smile. "You're up early," she chirped. "I thought you were going to sleep in today." I smiled back at her, a smile so hollow it might as well have been painted on my face. "Busy day," I said, and it was. I spent the next few hours meeting with my lawyer, quietly laying the foundation. Claire wouldn't just lose me. She would lose everything she had taken for granted, her lifestyle, her comfort, her lies. And by the time she realized it, it would be too late. Because some betrayals don't deserve mercy, only justice. And justice was coming. The first strike had to be subtle, visible enough to cause cracks, but not so obvious that Claire would realize where the blow had come from. We decided to start with her social standing. Claire loved hosting, loved being admired. Brunches with polished women from the neighborhood, charity events at the country club, garden parties where she held court in expensive dresses and shining pearls. All built on the image of a perfect wife, a perfect life. It was time to shatter that illusion. I contacted Nolan again. Find something, I told him. Anything she wouldn't want her friends to know. It didn't take him long. Apparently, Claire had been using her position at the local historical society, where she served as vice chair, to award contracts to companies where Warren had hidden stakes. Nothing illegal, but enough to smell like nepotism. Enough to raise eyebrows. Enough to stain. I crafted an anonymous email, just a few lines, clinical and to the point, with attached screenshots Nolan had secured, and sent it to the board of directors. By the end of the week, Claire was called in for a review meeting. The morning she left for it, she was all stiff smiles and forced jokes. "I'm sure it's just a formality," she said, adjusting her diamond earrings in the mirror. Some jealous little thing stirring trouble. I watched her go without a word. Later that afternoon, she returned, slamming the door so hard the frames rattled on the walls. She didn't speak. Didn't need to. The set of her mouth, the wildness in her eyes, it told me everything. "They're suspending me," she hissed at Warren over the phone later, unaware that Lily had slipped a second recorder into the hallway lamp. "Pending investigation. Can you believe it?" "You think it's someone on the board?" Warren asked. Claire's voice cracked under the strain. "I don't know. Maybe. Someone jealous or stupid. I need this position, Warren. It's the only thing that—" She cut herself off. Only thing that what? Gave her status? Made her feel superior? It didn't matter. What mattered was that the first fracture had formed, and fractures had a way of spreading. Meanwhile, Lily wasn't content to sit idly. "Mom thinks she can manipulate everyone," she said one night as we sat on the back porch. "Let's use it." She proposed something risky, feeding Claire false information through a carefully planted mistake. An overheard phone call between me and an old female friend from college, faked naturally, where I would hint at frustrations, at dissatisfaction, maybe even regret over my marriage. Claire would hear it, and maybe, just maybe, she'd push harder, thinking I was closer to walking away, thinking she could nudge me out, take what she wanted, and move on with Warren. I agreed, and so, one evening, Lily forgot her phone recording app running on the kitchen counter while I stood near the window, pretending to talk. "She's different now," I said loudly enough for Claire, who was conveniently watering plants on the patio, to hear. "I miss how it used to be, before everything got cold." Pause. A fake laugh. No one's waiting in the wings. I'm just tired of pretending everything's fine." It was enough. Later that night, Claire came to bed in silky lingerie she hadn't worn in years. She tried to press close to me, her touch hesitant, false. I closed my eyes and thought about how many times she must have worn that same smile for Warren. "Not tonight," I said, pulling away gently. Hurt flashed across her face, not because she loved me, but because her control was slipping. Good. Let it slip. The next day, I overheard her on the phone. "I think it's happening sooner than we thought," she whispered to Warren. "I'll nudge him, make it his idea." I smiled grimly. Let her try. Let her dig her own grave. But betrayal has a funny way of spreading its rot. And soon, Claire's facade began to crumble outside the house, too. A neighbor, Mrs. Kavanaugh, always one for gossip, cornered me at the grocery store. "Heard about Claire's situation at the Historical Society," she said, eyes gleaming. "Such a shame. Always thought she was so proper. Proper. If only they knew." I gave a polite nod and moved on. The seeds were planted. Now it was time to let them grow. By midweek, the tension in the house was so thick it felt almost alive. Claire was unraveling, though she tried to hide it with brittle smiles and forced jokes. Every time her phone buzzed, she would snatch it up with a nervous glance. Every knock at the door made her flinch. The once proud queen of our little castle was starting to feel hunted, and she should have. Because Lily and I weren't done yet. We needed one more push, something to make Claire overreach, to force her to show her true face publicly. Lily was the one who suggested the party. "Mom needs an audience," she said. "She needs people to see her winning. Let's give her one." It was genius. Claire, desperate to cling to her slipping reputation, would leap at the chance to throw a lavish party. And under pressure, people make mistakes. I casually mentioned it at breakfast. "You know," I said, sipping my coffee, "it's been too long since we had everyone over. Maybe it's time for a real celebration. Something big." Claire's eyes lit up, the way a drowning person might when they spot a rope. "That's a wonderful idea," she said too quickly. "I'll start planning right away." She launched into it with manic energy, calling caterers, hiring decorators, sending out invites to everyone who mattered in her world. In 2 days, the house was transformed. Fairy lights strung across the backyard, a live jazz band setting up near the pool, tables laden with gourmet food. Claire flitted from task to task, barking orders at staff, obsessing over every detail. But underneath it all, I saw the cracks, the too bright laughter, the snapped responses when things went wrong, the trembling hands when she thought no one was looking. And Warren, he was there too. Of course he was. Hovering around Claire, pretending to be the supportive family member, sneaking lingering touches when he thought no one would notice, but people noticed. More than they realized. The party began at sunset. Guests arrived in a swirl of designer suits and glittering dresses, exchanging hugs and fake smiles. Claire glided through the crowd, wearing a silver gown and a carefully constructed mask of happiness. I stayed back, playing the role of the content husband, letting everyone see what they expected to see. But in the shadows, Nolan moved among the guests, snapping candid photos, capturing the subtle interactions that would damn Claire and Warren beyond repair. And Lily? She mingled with the guests effortlessly, planting little seeds of doubt in whispered conversations. So strange, isn't it? How close Claire and Warren have gotten. After Ellen left, I mean, some people say he's barely living in his own house anymore. "Oh, did you see them last week at the vineyard? Just the two of them, so cozy." Whispers spread like wildfire. I watched as guests' eyes sharpened, as glances grew speculative. Claire was too busy basking in her temporary spotlight to notice. Until it was too late. It happened near midnight. The band took a break. The crowd thinned slightly, conversations turning loose and tipsy. I saw Warren brush a stray hair from Claire's cheek, his hand lingering too long, his gaze too intimate. And standing just a few feet away was Mrs. Kavanaugh, our community's most dedicated gossip. Her mouth dropped open. She wasn't the only one who noticed. In minutes, murmurs rippled across the patio. Claire, oblivious, laughed too loudly at something Warren said. I could see the realization dawning in real time, the sideways glances, the polite but increasingly chilly smiles. Her social foundation was crumbling beneath her stilettos, and she didn't even realize she had handed me the hammer. When the last guest finally left and the house fell into exhausted silence, Claire collapsed onto the couch, heels dangling from one hand. "Well," she said with a strained laugh, "I think it went perfectly, don't you?" I gave her a small smile. "Perfectly," I agreed, and it had. For us, not for her. Later that night, I found Lily sitting on the back steps, staring up at the stars. She didn't look victorious. She looked tired. "We're winning, Dad," she said quietly. "But why doesn't it feel good?" I sat beside her, pulling her into a loose hug. "Because we're not like them," I said. "We don't betray the people we love." We sat there for a long time, planning the next move, because the final act was coming, and Claire had no idea her audience was already turning against her. By Monday morning, the cracks in Claire's carefully crafted facade were no longer subtle. She lingered over her coffee, tapping one manicured fingernail against the mug with nervous energy. The television played a morning news segment she wasn't watching. I sat across from her, reading financial statements disguised as casual paperwork. Every day that passed, I was pulling a little more away, rerouting investments, locking down joint accounts, shifting ownership of properties under Lily's name through trusts Claire didn't even know existed. I was cutting off the oxygen supply. Claire still floated through the house as if she owned it, but she was already gasping, And the best part? She didn't even realize it yet. 2 nights later, Claire cornered me in the kitchen, her expression tight. "I was thinking," she said, running a hand through her hair. "It's silly that everything is still in both our names, don't you think? You're always so busy, Matthew. Maybe I should take over more of the handling." There it was, desperation, thinly veiled as concern. I set down my glass carefully and met her eyes. "That's thoughtful of you, Claire," I said smoothly, "but I've got it covered. No need to stress yourself." Something flickered in her gaze. For a split second, raw frustration, even anger, before the mask slid back into place. "Of course," she said, voice brittle. "I just want to help." I smiled, a thin, hollow thing, and turned back to my papers. Let her stew. Let her wonder why her claws were slipping. Meanwhile, Warren was showing signs of strain too. He called less often, came over less frequently, and when he did, his affection toward Claire was different, colder, more transactional. One evening, Lily caught them arguing on the back patio, Warren's voice low and furious. "You said he was almost out," he snapped. "You said we could have it all by now." Claire's voice was sharp with panic. "I'm working on it. He's stubborn, Warren. Just give me time." "Time's running out, Claire. I didn't sign up for this mess." I watched from the shadows of the kitchen window, the corners of my mouth lifting ever so slightly. They were cracking, turning on each other, exactly as planned. The next day, I escalated. At breakfast, I casually mentioned the idea of a temporary separation, as if it had only just occurred to me. Claire's fork clattered against her plate. "A separation?" she repeated, her voice strangled. I shrugged. "Just for a while. Space to think, to figure things out." I watched her carefully, panic warred with calculation in her expression. She needed to maintain control. If I pulled away officially, even just a little, it would ruin the perfect image she clung to in public. It would leave her vulnerable, alone. I don't think that's necessary," Claire said quickly, forcing a laugh. "We can work through this, whatever it is." There was no we anymore, only a slow, inevitable descent, and Claire was slipping faster every day. Later, I met Lily in the study, the door locked behind us. "She's desperate," Lily said, pacing restlessly. "She's going to do something stupid." "Good," I said. "We want stupid." But Lily stopped, looking at me seriously. "Dad, what if she hurts you first?" The thought had crossed my mind more than once. Claire wasn't above dirty tactics. She had already lied, cheated, manipulated. What was a little more treachery to someone like her? "We're prepared," I said firmly. And we were. Every financial document was shielded, every account locked down, every trust irrevocable. Claire could throw a tantrum, but she couldn't touch us anymore. That night after dinner, Claire lingered at the table, watching me with 2 bright eyes. "You know," she said carefully, "I've been thinking too." I raised an eyebrow. "Maybe we should sell some of the properties," she said, twirling her wine glass slowly. "Downsize a little. Simplify." There it was, her first real move. She needed liquid assets. She was trying to cash out before the noose tightened. "Maybe," I said mildly. Claire's smile faltered at my non-committal tone. She was slipping faster than she realized. And the worst part? She still thought she was in control. The thing about desperate people is they start thinking shortcuts are solutions. Claire had never been patient by nature. She built her whole life on appearances, quick wins, charm without depth. Now, facing real pressure, she didn't have the tools to survive. And she was about to prove it. 3 days after I suggested space between us, Claire made her move. I came home from work to find the house unnervingly spotless, the faint scent of lemon polish hanging heavy in the air. Claire was waiting in the kitchen, dressed elegantly, too elegantly for an ordinary day. Hair perfectly styled, lips painted blood red, and on the counter in front of her, 2 glasses of wine. "Rough day?" she asked sweetly. I glanced at the wine, noted the forced softness in her voice. Every instinct inside me prickled. Still, I played along. "Something like that," I said. She pushed one glass toward me. I picked it up, swirling it absently without drinking. She watched me too closely, waited too long for me to sip. In that moment, I knew. Claire had crossed a line. She had drugged the wine. I set it down without drinking, slowly, deliberately. Her smile wavered. "What's wrong?" she asked, her voice just a little too sharp. "Nothing," I said. "But maybe I'll stick to water tonight." Her fingers twitched. There it was, the naked panic. She had been counting on it, on me being vulnerable, on me losing track of myself just long enough for her to, what? Stage a confrontation? Plant something incriminating? Whatever her plan was, it was dead now, just like the last shreds of mercy I might have had for her. That night, I called Nolan. "I need the next phase ready," I told him. "By Friday." Nolan understood without asking questions. He always did. Meanwhile, Warren's loyalty continued to erode. Lily caught him leaving a bar 2 towns over, arm in arm with a woman who was definitely not Claire. We had photos, evidence, insurance. Claire thought Warren was her partner in crime. In reality, he was already half out the door, ready to cut his losses, and soon everyone would know it. Friday came, and with it, the final gathering, another charity gala Claire had spent weeks planning, desperate to repair the damage done to her image. She wore a glittering green dress, her face painted into a flawless mask of poise. But underneath, she was unraveling. I could see it in the tense set of her shoulders, the too bright laughter, the way her hand shook ever so slightly when she lifted her champagne flute. She was a woman teetering at the edge of a cliff, and I was about to give her the final push. Nolan had arranged everything perfectly. Halfway through the evening, a series of candid photos quietly circulated among the guests. Photos of Claire and Warren at the vineyard, photos of Warren's recent extracurricular activities, photos of Claire handing gifts to board members. Questionable gifts that now, under the shadow of her suspension from the Historical Society, looked much worse. The room buzzed with it. Eyes flicked toward Claire, pitying, judgmental, cruel. The tide had turned. She didn't know it yet. It wasn't until Mrs. Kavanaugh, smiling sweetly, approached Claire with faux sympathy that realization dawned. "Oh, Claire, darling," she said, voice syrupy. "I had no idea you were going through so much. It's just dreadful. What people are saying." Claire blinked, confusion bleeding into fear. "What people are saying?" she echoed, voice thin. Mrs. Kavanaugh's smile sharpened. "Well, you know how it is. Pictures circulate, stories spread. I'm sure it's all nonsense, of course." Claire swayed slightly on her heels. For the first time, her armor cracked, visibly, publicly. A hush fell around her as conversations slowed, stalled, shifted away. Isolation wrapped around her like a noose. She turned toward me across the room, seeking support. I raised my glass in a silent toast, and then I turned away. Later, at home, she cornered me in the hallway. Her makeup was smeared, her hands trembling. "What did you do?" she demanded. I looked at her, really looked, and saw her for what she truly was. Small, desperate, broken. "Nothing you didn't do to yourself," I said quietly. For the first time in months, Claire had no words, no defense, just silence. And it was beautiful. There's a particular kind of silence that follows a public fall from grace. It isn't the peaceful, healing kind. It's a gnawing, hollow thing, loud in its absence. The days after the gala were suffocating. Claire barely left the bedroom. She took her calls in whispers, snapped at Lily for imaginary slights, flinched whenever the doorbell rang. She knew the tide had turned. She just didn't know how to swim against it. And that's when desperate people become dangerous. It happened on a Tuesday. I came home from work later than usual. The house was eerily dark except for a faint glow from the study. I found Claire there, sitting behind my desk, papers scattered around her like the wreckage of a failed war. She didn't look up when I entered. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then she shoved a stack of papers toward me. "I want half," she said flatly. I glanced down, divorce papers, already drawn up, already signed, by her. I picked them up slowly, flipping through. Her terms were laughable. Half the estate, half the business assets, half of everything. even the things I had shielded months ago. It would have been funny if it wasn't so pathetic. You really think you're entitled to half? I asked quietly. Claire's eyes were bloodshot, her hands trembling. You're cold, Matthew. You pushed me away. You made me do what I did. Ah, there it was. The final deflection. The refusal to take responsibility even now. You made your own choices, Claire, I said, voice like iron. And now you're going to live with them. She stood up suddenly, knocking the chair back. You're not going to get away with this, she hissed. I'll ruin you before you ruin me. For a moment, there was something almost feral in her expression. And in that moment, I realized Claire wasn't planning to negotiate. She was planning to destroy, one way or another. The next day it started. Anonymous calls to my office. False tips about embezzlement. Fabricated accusations whispered through the corporate grapevine. Claire's fingerprints were all over it, sloppy, rushed, desperate. But in trying to destroy me, she only dug her own grave deeper. Nolan was ready. Every call, every anonymous email, every false report. We traced it all, compiled it, built a case so airtight even the best divorce attorney would laugh her out of court. And while Claire flailed, trying to claw back a sense of control, Lily and I prepared the final blow. Friday night, I sat Claire down in the living room. She was still defiant, chin lifted, eyes glassy. What is this? She snapped, crossing her arms. I dropped a thick folder onto the coffee table between us. Evidence, undeniable, recordings, photos, bank transactions, emails, a full accounting of her lies, her manipulations, her attempted character assassination. Claire's face paled as she flipped through the pages. Page after page. Proof after proof. Her hands began to shake. Where did you get this? She whispered. It doesn't matter, I said. All that matters is what happens next. She looked up at me, and for the first time in a long time I saw real fear in her eyes. You can fight me, I said calmly. Drag this into court. Let everyone see what you are. Claire swallowed hard. Or you can sign a very generous settlement agreement. Walk away quietly. Take what dignity you still have. Silence stretched between us. The power dynamic, once so heavily in her favor, had flipped completely. She wasn't the queen anymore. She was a pawn, a broken one at that. 2 days later, Claire signed. The terms were brutal, for her. Minimal alimony, no claim on the business. The house, mine. The vacation property, sold, profits placed in Lily's name. Claire walked away with enough to live, but never enough to thrive. And socially, she was radioactive. No one would touch her, not after what she had become, not after what she had done. But the story wasn't over. Not yet. Because Warren, seeing Claire's fall, decided it was time to disappear too. And he didn't go quietly. It was amazing how quickly a person could become a ghost. Within days of signing the settlement, Claire disappeared from the few remaining circles that still tolerated her. Her name, once dropped with admiration at every gala and luncheon, became a cautionary whisper, an example, an embarrassment. And Warren? He was already planning his exit. It started with the texts. Lily intercepted them. Warren had been careless, too used to secrecy, not careful enough. The messages were blunt. Need to talk soon, can't stay tied down anymore. She's a wreck, no use anymore. Moving on once the dust settles. He wasn't even pretending anymore. Claire, in her delusion, still thought Warren loved her, still clung to the idea that they could start a new life once the scandal faded. But the truth? Warren was already lining up his next mark. You could almost pity her. Almost. It happened one afternoon at a quiet cafe on the edge of town. Claire thought she was meeting Warren to discuss their future. She wore a cream sweater and jeans, trying for casual, but the tension in her posture betrayed her. I watched from a distance, not interfering, just observing. It was Warren who arrived late, sunglasses hiding his eyes, his smile thin. He sat across from her, not touching her hand, not even pretending intimacy anymore. I couldn't hear everything from where I sat, but the body language said it all. Claire leaned in, pleading. Warren leaned back, arms crossed, impassive. Finally, he stood, tossed a few bills on the table, turned away and left Claire sitting there, her mouth open in stunned silence, tears welling up in her eyes. She called after him, quietly at first, then louder, desperately. But Warren didn't look back, not once. That night, Claire came home drunk. Lily and I watched from the top of the stairs as she stumbled through the door, her purse falling to the floor with a dull thud. She slumped onto the bottom step, head in her hands. And for the first time, there were no words, no insults, no accusations, no lies. Just quiet, broken sobbing that echoed through the empty house. The sound of someone who had finally realized they were alone and deserved it. Later, Lily sat beside me on the porch swing, staring into the darkness. "She's finished," she said softly. I nodded. "She did it to herself," I said. Still, there was a heaviness in Lily's voice. "It doesn't feel as good as I thought it would." I squeezed her hand gently. "That's because you have a conscience," I said, and she never did. It was true. Lily had grown through this, not into something cruel, but into someone stronger, sharper, less naive. And I was proud of her, even if the road here had been paved with bitterness. The next morning, Claire was gone. No note, no goodbye, just gone. And strangely, the house felt lighter, as if her absence had cleared the air itself. I didn't ask where she went. I didn't care. Whatever life she managed to scrape together from the wreckage was none of my concern. She had made her choices, and she had finally been forced to live with them. Weeks passed. Slowly, the wounds she had inflicted, on me, on Lily, began to scab over. We talked more, laughed more. Lily enrolled in a summer art program she had once been too timid to try. I took a vacation for the first time in years. Life somehow went on, better, cleaner, quieter, without Claire. But somewhere I knew she was still out there, clawing through her days, shunned, bitter, broken. Warren had moved on. I heard through whispers that he was already engaged to someone else, a younger woman from out of state. Claire? She had nothing. No friends to rally behind her, no money to cushion her fall, no reputation to rebuild, only memories of what she had lost, of the family she had destroyed, of the life she had thrown away for a man who left her in a cheap diner without so much as a backward glance. And honestly, that was more punishment than anything I could have orchestrated. Some mornings still felt strange, quiet, almost too quiet. For years, the house had been filled with the background noise of Claire. Laughter that was never quite sincere, footsteps that always seemed to echo with judgment. Now, there was only stillness and peace. One morning, as sunlight streamed across the kitchen tiles, Lily and I sat across from each other, each with a cup of coffee. She twirled a spoon absently, lost in thought. "She's really gone," she said after a long moment. It wasn't a question, just an acknowledgement. I nodded. "She's gone," I agreed. We didn't celebrate it. There was no triumph left to feel. Only a bittersweet sort of relief. Freedom often came at a price, and we had paid it in full. For a while, we tiptoed around the edges of normal life. Small steps. Lily started painting again. Real paintings this time, not just the sketches she used to hide in notebooks. I found myself lingering over projects at work, not because I had to, but because I wanted to, because I could finally breathe without the weight pressing on my ribs. The house slowly changed too. Claire's cold, perfect decor began to disappear, bit by bit. The sterile gray furniture replaced with warm woods. The sharp modern paintings swapped for pieces that actually meant something. It wasn't just redecorating, it was reclaiming. One afternoon, about a month after Claire had vanished, Lily found an old photo album buried in the back of a closet. She sat cross-legged on the living room floor, flipping through pages filled with frozen smiles, family vacations, birthday parties, Christmas mornings, pictures that, at the time, had seemed perfect. Now, with the benefit of hindsight, they felt hollow, a life built on performances. Lily held up one photo, a shot of the three of us at a beach resort, arms linked, grinning for the camera. "Was any of it real?" she asked quietly. I looked at the photo for a long time, at Claire's bright, hollow smile, at my own weary eyes, at Lily, young and unguarded, still believing in the fairy tale. Maybe parts of it were, I said finally, but not enough. Lily nodded, setting the album aside. Neither of us said it, but we both understood. It wasn't about erasing the past. It was about building something better from its ashes. Occasionally, whispers about Claire would reach us. Nothing concrete. Rumors, mostly. She was seen working at a boutique in another city, or bartending at a small-town dive. Always jobs far below the pedestal she once insisted on standing atop. No friends, no family, no Warren. Just scraps of a life she had torn apart with her own hands. I didn't seek her out. Didn't need to. Knowing she was out there, living the consequences of her choices, was enough. One evening, as the sun set in a blaze of gold and crimson, Lily and I sat on the back porch. It had become our unspoken ritual, just sitting, breathing, existing without fear or tension. She leaned her head against my shoulder. "Do you think she ever thinks about us?" she asked softly. I didn't hesitate. "She thinks about what she lost," I said, "not who she hurt." That was Claire's legacy. Not love, not loyalty, loss. And she would carry it alone for the rest of her life. I looked over at Lily. Stronger now, braver. She had scars, sure. We both did. But scars meant healing, meant survival, and survival was its own kind of victory. "I'm proud of you," I said quietly. She smiled, a real smile, soft and steady. "I'm proud of you too, Dad." And for the first time in a long, long time, I believed it. The road ahead wasn't paved with vengeance anymore. It was open, uncertain, ours, and whatever scars we carried, whatever shadows still lingered, we would face them together, free. It was strange how quickly a house could stop feeling like a prison. After Claire left, the walls seemed to breathe differently. The floors didn't creak under the weight of tension anymore. The air itself felt lighter. Still, ghosts lingered. Not the kind that rattle chains in the night. The quieter kind. The kind you meet in old photographs, in forgotten drawers, in the way a certain song makes you stop mid-step. One Saturday morning, while cleaning out the attic, Lily and I found another box, one neither of us recognized. Inside were Claire's journals, neat leather-bound books, each labeled by year. I hesitated, fingers brushing over the covers. Part of me wanted to burn them without reading a word. But curiosity, or maybe the need for understanding, won out. We sat side by side on the dusty floor, flipping through pages. The entries were what you might expect. Self-absorbed musings, dreams about status, admiration, control. Resentments, long-held and petty. Not once did she write about love, about family, about us, only about herself, what she wanted, what she deserved, what she hated not having. Lily closed one of the books with a sharp snap. "She never saw us as people," she said, voice flat. "We were just accessories to her story." I nodded. It wasn't surprising. But it was still painful. Painful to see it written so plainly. Painful to realize how much time we had wasted trying to be enough for someone who was never capable of seeing us clearly. We threw the journals away, not in anger, not in a dramatic bonfire. Just put them in the trash where they belonged. And it felt right, like finally putting a headstone on a grave. Not mourning, just acknowledging, and moving on. Later, I found Lily sitting on the back porch, sketchbook in hand. She wasn't drawing the sharp, angry images she used to when Claire's betrayal was fresh. Now her pencil moved gently, carefully. She was sketching a tree. Strong, gnarled, stubborn. It was beautiful in its imperfection, just like healing. I sat beside her, watching the sunset paint the sky in golds and violets. "We're okay," she said quietly. I smiled. "We are." And we were. Different. Wiser. A little battered. But okay. In the following weeks, we rebuilt in small ways. A new Sunday tradition, homemade pizza nights instead of awkward family dinners. Weekend hikes instead of forced charity events. Real conversations instead of careful, guarded ones. Lily even suggested we take a trip, just the two of us, something we hadn't done in years. We booked a cabin by a lake 2 towns over, no pretensions, no performances, just open sky, quiet water, and the space to be. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I was looking forward to something, genuinely, without fear, without Claire's shadow looming overhead. One evening, packing for the trip, I found an old photo at the bottom of a drawer. It was just Lily and me, a candid shot someone had taken at a fair years ago. I was holding her on my shoulders, both of us laughing, faces smeared with ice cream. Pure, unfiltered, real. Not staged, not for show. I slipped the photo into my bag, a reminder of who we had always been beneath the layers Claire had tried to bury us under. The day we left for the cabin, Lily turned to me in the car, grinning. "You know," she said, "we're gonna make so many better memories now." I squeezed her hand. "I know." And as we pulled onto the highway, leaving the familiar behind, it finally felt like we were moving forward. Not running away, not surviving, living. The lake in the morning was a sheet of glass, still, untouched. Lily and I sat on the dock, our feet dangling above the water, sipping coffee from mismatched mugs we found in the cabin's tiny kitchen. It was quiet, but not the heavy, suffocating quiet we had lived through for so long. This quiet was peaceful, healing. "Do you think she's happy somewhere?" Lily asked suddenly, staring into the distance. Her voice wasn't bitter, just curious. I thought about it. About Claire. About the way she had clung to appearances, to control, to validation that never filled the hollow space inside her. "I don't know," I said honestly, "but I don't think happiness was ever something she knew how to find." Lily nodded slowly. Maybe she never even knew what it was supposed to feel like. Neither of us said it, but the thought was there. How sad, how small, to go through life chasing something without ever understanding it. Later that afternoon, we took the rowboat out onto the lake. The oars creaked against the wood, and small ripples spread out behind us, disturbing the perfect surface. We didn't talk much. We didn't need to. The silence between us wasn't empty anymore. It was full of understanding. At one point, Lily lay back against the bow, arms behind her head, face turned up toward the sky. "You know," she said lazily, "for a long time I thought revenge would fix everything." I smiled a little, rowing slowly. And it didn't," she said simply. "It helped. But it didn't fix the parts inside me that got broken. I understood, because it hadn't fixed mine either. It had cleared the wreckage. But the rebuilding? That was work we had to do ourselves. That evening we built a small fire on the beach. Not because we needed the warmth, because sometimes you need to watch something burn. We threw a few old papers into the flames, scraps of the past that no longer served us. Not with anger, not with ceremony, just releasing, letting go. Lily watched the fire for a long time. "I used to think it was my fault," she said quietly. "That if I'd been a better daughter, maybe she would have loved us enough to stay." I put an arm around her shoulders. "It was never about you," I said. "It was never even about me." Claire's failures were hers alone. Her emptiness, her choices. We had just been collateral damage, but not anymore. On the last night of the trip, we sat on the cabin porch, wrapped in blankets, watching a thunderstorm roll across the lake. Lightning cracked the sky open, briefly illuminating the water in stark, brilliant flashes. The rain came hard and fast, drumming on the roof, soaking the earth. It felt cleansing, like the final baptism of everything we had survived. Lily leaned her head on my shoulder. "I don't hate her anymore," she said. Neither did I. There was no room left inside me for hatred. Only the memory of lessons hard learned, and the promise of something better, something real. We left the cabin the next morning under a sky so clear it almost hurt to look at. Driving home, I realized something. The weight I had carried for so long, the guilt, the anger, the grief, had finally begun to lift. Not because Claire was gone, but because I had stopped letting her occupy space inside me. The final stage of healing wasn't about forgetting her. It was about remembering ourselves, who we had been before her betrayal, and who we were becoming without her shadow darkening every corner of our lives. For the first time in a very long time, I looked forward to the future, not because it was guaranteed to be easy, but because it was finally ours. The drive back home felt shorter than the drive out. Funny how that works. Maybe because the burden we had carried there, all the leftover anger, sadness, fear, wasn't coming back with us. We left it by the lake, drowned it under the stars. The house was still the same white shutters, same creaky porch step. But it felt different now. It didn't loom, it welcomed. The first thing we did after unpacking was open all the windows, let the fresh air sweep through every room, let the dust and the shadows Claire had left behind finally scatter. It was more than cleaning. It was exorcism. And it worked. Life settled into a rhythm almost effortlessly. Lily started classes again, picking up art and literature. She even made a few new friends, real ones, not the polished, backstabbing kids Claire used to push her toward. She laughed more, smiled more. And it wasn't forced, it wasn't survival, it was living. I threw myself into work too, but with a lighter heart. No longer working to escape. Now working because I wanted to build something, not to prove anything to anyone, especially not to Claire. I even started running again, something I hadn't done in years. Not because I was chasing anything, but because sometimes it feels good to move forward under your own power. We redecorated the house together slowly, piece by piece. A hand-carved coffee table from a local craftsman. A few paintings Lily made, landscapes, wild and free. Nothing flashy, nothing meant to impress anyone else. It was a house for living now, not performing. One evening, sitting by the fireplace, Lily turned to me. "Do you think we'll ever hear from her again?" she asked. I thought about it. About Claire, wherever she was now, scraping together a life from the ruins she had made. If she thought about us at all, it would be with bitterness, not remorse. "I doubt it," I said. "And if we do, it won't matter." Lily smiled softly. "Yeah, it won't." And it was true. Whatever Claire's next chapter looked like, it was no longer part of our story. We had turned the page. One Saturday, a letter arrived. No return address, no name, just a thin, crumpled envelope. I almost didn't open it, almost threw it straight into the trash, but curiosity, or maybe something deeper, won out. Inside was a short note, scrawled in rushed handwriting. No apology, no explanations, just 2 words. "I'm sorry." No signature. But we both knew. Claire. It didn't stir anger or sadness, just a strange kind of closure, not because her words made anything better, but because it confirmed what we already knew. She was lost, and we were free. I folded the letter carefully and tucked it into a drawer, not out of sentimentality, out of acknowledgement, proof that the past was real, but that it no longer defined us. As spring melted into summer, life blossomed around us. We planned another trip, somewhere farther this time, maybe the mountains, maybe the coast. It didn't matter. The destination wasn't the point. The point was that we could go, freely, lightly, without chains around our ankles. One evening, sitting in the backyard watching fireflies flicker like tiny stars, Lily said something that stayed with me. "You know, Dad, we didn't just survive her." I looked at her, puzzled. "We outgrew her." I smiled, because she was right. Claire hadn't destroyed us. She had freed us, in the harshest way possible. And now, without her, we had room to become who we were always meant to be. The past was still there. It always would be. But it wasn't the whole story. Not anymore. It was just the first few chapters. The hard ones. The ones that make the rest sweeter by contrast. And the next chapters? Those were ours to write. Together. Without fear, without apology, without her. Spring blurred into summer with a kind of slow, steady magic. For the first time in what felt like forever, time wasn't something we measured in disasters. It just passed. In bike rides through the park, in long talks over backyard barbecues, in small golden moments that stitched themselves into something real and lasting. Lily started working part-time at a small art supply store in town. She came home most evenings with paint smudges on her hands and a light in her eyes that hadn't been there for years. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was becoming, growing into the woman Claire never gave her space to be. Watching her, I realized something important. Claire's legacy hadn't been destruction. It had been resilience. Not because of her, but in spite of her. One Saturday afternoon, Lily dragged me downtown for a local art festival. I grumbled the whole way there, pretending to be an old curmudgeon. She rolled her eyes at me but laughed, slipping her arm through mine. The streets were alive with color and sound, music drifting from open windows, booths lined with paintings, sculptures, handmade jewelry. It wasn't the kind of event Claire would have ever tolerated. Too messy, too real, which made it perfect. At one booth, Lily stopped in front of a small canvas. It wasn't flashy, just a simple painting of a single tree, twisted by wind but still standing strong. She stared at it for a long time. When she turned to me, there were tears in her eyes, but the good kind. "I want to buy it," she said. I smiled. "Then let's do it." We brought it home and hung it in the living room, right above the fireplace. A symbol, a reminder of survival, of growth, of enduring. Later that evening, sitting under the stars with a glass of lemonade in hand, Lily turned to me. "You ever think about dating again?" she asked casually, nudging me with her elbow. I laughed, a real laugh. "I barely remember how," I said. She grinned mischievously. "You're not that old." "Thanks," I said dryly. "I'll put that on my tombstone." But her question stayed with me, because for the first time the idea didn't fill me with dread. It wasn't about replacing anything. It was about opening up, letting life back in, at my own pace, on my own terms. One evening, sorting through the last boxes Claire had left behind, I found something unexpected, an old notebook of mine. Something from years ago, before Claire, back when dreams felt possible. Inside were scribbled ideas for a business I never started, sketches of projects I abandoned to be the provider, the protector, the peacekeeper. I sat there for a long time, flipping through those yellowed pages, not mourning what I'd lost, but remembering who I had been, who I could still be. The next week, I signed up for a woodworking class at the community center. It wasn't about career or money. It was about creation, about making something with my hands, something real, about reclaiming the parts of myself Claire had tried to erase. Lily cheered me on shamelessly, teasing but proud. "You're going to be the cool dad with homemade furniture," she said, elbowing me. "Only if you paint it afterward," I shot back. "Deal," she said, laughing. We weren't rebuilding the old life. We were building a new one. Different. Better. Ours. I knew there would still be hard days, memories that ambushed us, moments when old wounds ached like phantom limbs. That was the nature of scars. But scars weren't shameful. They were proof that we had survived, proof that we were stronger than the things that tried to break us. As summer deepened, plans began forming naturally. Lily talked about applying to art schools, ones that valued creativity over pedigree. I encouraged her, knowing she would thrive. And maybe, just maybe, I would meet someone new someday. Not because I needed saving, not because I needed fixing, but because finally I had space to share, not to fill a void, but to build something new. And every step forward, every smile, every sunrise, every laughter-filled afternoon, it was a victory, a testament to everything Claire had failed to destroy. The past wasn't erased, but it wasn't the ending anymore. It was just the beginning of a better story. Ours, written in our own hands, on clean, honest pages. Summer faded into fall, and with it came change. But this time, change didn't feel threatening. It felt natural. I stood on the back porch one crisp morning, coffee warming my hands, watching as the first leaves turned gold and scarlet. The world shedding its skin, making way for something new. It felt fitting. We were doing the same. Lily submitted her portfolio to 3 art schools, not the ones Claire would have pushed her toward, prestigious, soulless institutions. No, places where creativity mattered more than status, places where she could be herself. She got acceptance letters from 2 of them. When she opened the first envelope, her hands shook, not with fear, with joy, pure, radiant joy. We celebrated with cheap pizza and a movie marathon, laughing until our sides hurt. And for the first time, I realized something simple and profound. Lily wasn't just my daughter anymore. She was a survivor, a creator, a force. and I had no doubt she would shape a life so much bigger and brighter than anything Claire could have ever imagined for her. As for me, I finished my woodworking class, built a small bench with my own hands, sanded smooth, sturdy, imperfect. I kept it by the front door, a small, tangible proof that I could still create, still grow, still be more than the man Claire had tried to trap inside a box of duty and guilt. One Saturday morning, Lily and I hosted a small gathering, just a few friends from her classes, a couple of people I'd met through work. Simple, real. The house buzzed with easy conversation and laughter. No masks, no performances, just people showing up as themselves. I caught Lily's eye across the room and she smiled, wide and unguarded. And in that moment I knew, we hadn't just survived. We had won, not by destroying Claire, but by refusing to let her destroy us. Later that evening, after the guests had left and the house had gone quiet again, I sat on the porch, the cool night air brushing against my skin. Lily joined me, a mug of tea in her hands. We didn't speak for a while, just watched the stars blink into existence one by one. Finally, she said, "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if things had been different?" I thought about it, about the endless nights I had spent asking that same question. The what-ifs, the could-have-beens. "I used to," I admitted. "Not anymore." She nodded, understanding before I even explained. "If things had been different," I said, "we wouldn't be who we are now." And I liked who we were now, stronger, wiser, whole. Healing hadn't erased the pain, but it had given it meaning, turned it into fuel, into something that could build instead of destroy. As fall deepened, we made new traditions. Pumpkin carving contests, Sunday morning hikes, art projects sprawling across the living room. Life wasn't perfect. It was better, because it was real, because it was ours. One chilly October night, as I tucked an old blanket tighter around my shoulders, Lily nudged me gently. "You ever think about trying again?" "Trying what?" "Love," she said, grinning mischievously. I laughed. "Maybe someday," I said, "when the right person comes along." "And until then?" I looked around, at the home we had built, the peace we had earned. "Until then," I said, "this is enough." And it truly was. We didn't need a perfect ending. We didn't need a fairy tale. We had something better. A life earned the hard way, a bond forged in fire, freedom, hope, the promise of tomorrow, written not in fear, but in strength. The past would always be a part of us, but it didn't own us anymore. We carried it like old scars, reminders of battles survived, not chains holding us back. And as I sat there, watching my daughter, this incredible, fierce, resilient woman, laugh under the stars, I realized we weren't broken. We weren't victims. We weren't defined by what we had lost. We were defined by what we had built from the ashes, by the way we had chosen to live, by the way we would keep choosing every single day. And that choice, that strength, that love, that was something Claire could never take away. No one ever could again. The end of her story was not the end of ours. It was only the beginning.